Part of the difficulty of identifying that is that challenges have always ended up in my mind as being as being opportunities. Um, but if I were to think about challenges, I mean, other than look, I went to two places as a manager. I told you about where the place that I was going to, or the location, thought that their guy was going to get the job. So there was this earn their respect and earn their confidence going on for the first 3 or 4 months. Plus, one of those guys stayed as a manager under me, and that was always a little bone of contention. Major challenge, for some people, I think maybe the major challenge would have been all the moves I made, because every single one of these moves was made when they wanted me to move. Remote work was not the thing then. And they were always mid-year, like January.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Another amazing show. Today we have Bob Lodie, and I got to tell you, this is going to be inspiring. So get ready to be inspired. For me, this is a story of a self-made man. So I get inspired when I hear people who are self-made tell their story, take us through their journey. Especially when you hear from somebody like him, who, in my opinion, has the ability to see what other people don't see. And I don't mean that in terms of ghosts. I mean, when you hear about the successes he's had, and you hear about the teams he's built, and you hear about the growth that he's been a part of leading and creating, you're going to hear that he has the ability to see what other people don't see, which is opportunity. So, Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Wow, where do we start? You have done so much, and you have been so many places, and you have had so much success that we could start anywhere, and it would be a fun part of the story. Actually, let's reverse it. Let's start at the end. Give me what comes to mind when I say to you the rundown of, hey, I'm Bob, and here's what I've done. I've been this, and this at these major companies. Give me the end first, and then we'll go back to the beginning.
Well, the end as far as my current career versus the other 4 or 5?
A summary of the highlights of the things that you brag about the most.
Oh, well, look, my current one is to deal with some context here. I've got to tell you context. I work with financial advisors and managements in the financial services industry. And I'm there to specifically do what they really want from anybody that they talk to, which is, how do I find new clients? How do I find a lot more assets to put under management? And significant clients are best, and hopefully I like them. But how do I do that? Where do I find them? When do I contact them? What do I say? All of that good stuff. And that everybody's different. The thing that I enjoy a lot about this particular business that I'm in is that every individual is different. I mean, they're unique. And so even though the products that they have are not unique, all they have to do is work on themselves, as opposed to be better at your product pitch or something. Because how do you measure that? I mean, you could be number one on day one, and then next day you're not the fastest gun in town. You don't have the best product. It's not that. That's not the difference. The difference is you. And as long as you know yourself, and this is something that when I work with advisors, I say, I want you to write a profile about yourself, starting at about high school. And I want hobbies and everything that you've been interested in, what you've tried and failed at, what you're good at, what you're not good at, those sorts of things. And I want it for 2 reasons. One, I want to know the person that I'm working with, so that I don't have to ask him, what does he need most? You can almost see it when they write that profile. And they enjoy doing that. They always say, this was kind of a fun exercise. I've never done that before. But the other reason for doing it is that when they're looking for clients, before they start to look, better know the kind of person you're looking for. Now, you may have some ideal clients that you want to, get more of. So that's good. And for those ideal clients, you profile them. You should have a good profile on them. And you will be able to see where the matches are and where they're not. You can also profile prospects, and you're looking for those things that resonate, that are similar. That type of work, that type of conversation is what was probably the most meaningful one you can have. it covers a lot of bases. It certainly is the foundation for where do I find this person, because you profile the client and you've got three of them that are a same hobby. And we won't say golf because everybody says golf is their hobby, but
Right.
classic cars, for instance, they're into classic cars. Oh, okay. So and one of them, they're all your clients. So you can go and talk to each one of them and say, so how do you enjoy that? I mean, do you go to shows? What do you do? Oh, I belong to an association that, and we meet on Zoom now. We used to meet once a month. Now we meet every week because we got Zoom. And you say, really, a lot of people are there a lot of people there like you? Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, let me get some advice for you. All right. If you were me, how would you reach these people? How would you go about meeting them? Now that person's either going to say, gee, I don't know, or let me think about it. Or he might say, well, come to one of our meetings and I'll introduce you. You know where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you don't try to sell that person in the first conversation. You get to know them a little bit, and then they get to know you.
It's a process.
So yeah, it's a process.
Let me zoom out. I want to zoom out a little bit. I want to get back to what you're saying because there's so much, I think there's a lot of information if we dive really deep into processes and the approach, but I don't want to skip over. You have 50 years of management experience. So I kind of was looking for you to go you have 50. I'm going to read it off your bio. You have 50 years of management experience.
Yeah.
A U.S. Air Force air combat veteran.
Yeah.
I want people to get to know, you're not just a guy who's talking about what you're doing now. There's a lot of things you did along the way that molded you, that taught you perseverance and determination and hard work. It didn't just happen, right? So you're an Air Force air combat veteran, and I guess 50 years ago, where would that put us?
What was what?
Where would that put us? Air combat veteran in what war?
Yeah,
I'm not good with history.
How about the Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam?
Okay, and you were out there. You're a pilot.
Yeah, no, I was an air crew member. We had what they call a certified crew. You always either these three guys flew together, or if one of them was sick, they didn't fly. The other two, unless I certified someone else, because it was a very high sensitive recon mission. And not
you were doing reconnaissance, or were you dropping bombs? Or you were flying over and doing reconnaissance?
No, it was recon. It was reconnaissance. It was at 30,000, 35,000 feet. It was in a C-130, which is a 4-engine cargo plane with 4 turboprop engines with 900 degrees centigrade heat coming out of them. So you didn't want to. Heat-seeking missiles would take you out in a second. We had flight combat cover, what they call air combat cover, in our missions. And the flights emanated out of Yokota, where I was stationed, and we would fly day missions out of Yokota to off the coast of Russia, also off the coast of North Korea and China. And one of the things you never did was make a turn that looked like you were turning into the country that you were headed to. Listen, we have been wing to wing with a Soviet MiG. They took our picture, with the camera. Our pilot takes their picture with the camera, and then one of them, unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but don't do that again, Pete.
There was a scene from Top Gun. They did. Remember in Top Gun when they had the 2 airplanes side by side taking pictures?
Not quite that, but quite that. And I don't know if anybody had the bird out, but I know that my aircraft.
Right, the universal signal.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, oh my God, come on, this guy's bigger than us. Stop it.
So you have that. It's important that we talk. So you have that. That certainly gives you a perspective. Then you leave that your service and you go into the corporate world. And you worked for some major companies and you built some major teams, right?
Yeah.
Keep it high level. Tell me what companies, what did you build? I want people to hear. This is what I mean when I say you see things other people don't see. That's why you were able to do that.
Okay. Well, I was in the service for only 6.5 years. Nav training in Sacramento, got my choice of assignment. I will tell you that because I was top of my class, I'm an achiever. And and I picked Japan. There was only 2 Japan assignments, and so I took one. I didn't want to go to Forbes Air Force Base and fly troop carrier. I wanted to do something different. So I get to Japan. I'm flying there, and I then come back to Sacramento as an instructor, because my colonel that I knew then was now head of all training. So I wrote him a letter, and he got me back to training, which is a cushy job. Loved doing training. You had students, and I got out of the service though, because this is a marker in my life. I discovered something in the service that it told me what I am and what I'm not. I remember being as an instructor, they had a job opening on the base it was called a Secondary Air Force Systems Code, AFSC. This is something you did when you weren't flying. And it was to work in the computer department. I'm not sure I don't think they described the job, but it was to work with a computer. This is 1970. Yeah, 1970. So computers were mainframes then. So I applied for it. My background, I won't brag about my GPA, but I was a electrical engineering in college. And I was getting my MBA at night, and I applied for the job. And I was told sort of quietly that I was actually more qualified for the job for the other guy, but the other guy had 3 more months of service time than I did. So it goes to the person with the longest service record. Now that, plus the idea that in the service, when you hit certain years of pay grades, then you get additional pay grade. You can't earn it faster. This is the way maybe you get from major to colonel a year and a half faster, but that's if you went to the Air Force Academy or West Point and you were a pilot. But for navigators, and ROTC, so what? So I said, this isn't for me. I mean, I'm I am not. And what happens is 8 years after you're in the service, no matter what you're doing in the service, they put you back into that primary job of navigator. And it's like, I've been there, done that. The only thing that changed in that period of time is now I had GPS working where I didn't have that before. It was all radar and, other stuff. So that was a big difference. I went to work, Matt, for another general, and the general was called General Electric. And that was really the start of the business career, and a fabulous way to get into business, because with General Electric, they were a large organization. They had a training company location up on the Hudson River, called in Crotonville, New York, and it's now called the Jack Welch Leadership Center. And if, depending on your career and how you were doing and how you were looked upon, they didn't write an efficiency report like in the Air Force where they had to say you were great, otherwise you would be doomed. So you didn't learn anything from that. I wanted to know what was it I'm not doing right, and you never heard that in those efficiency reports. So in GE, I joined them, and within a year and a half's time, I was tapped for a branch manager's job. And for the first time that everybody could remember, I was offered a choice of 2 locations. I could go to Pittsburgh or I could go to Seattle. And Seattle's on the West Coast. And I'm thinking, hey, West Coast, I'm going to the West Coast because I really want to be the guy who runs LA. That is the flagship. That in New York City are the flagships. So I go to Seattle, and I'm there a year and a half, maybe, not even quite that. And I was told that 4 months into the thing look, unless your branch, which was the Pacific Northwest, including Alaska, unless they hit X number of growth, they're going to not sell, but turn over that Northwest territory to Canada, to GE Canada. So I come back from my flight down to LA where I'm hearing this news, and I write up something called The Rebirth of Seattle, a Family Plan. And I wrote it up, and I intentionally didn't have it Xerox copied or whatever we copied it with and what machine. I wanted everybody to get a copy of it as it was, as opposed to don't type it up or anything else. This is a working plan. This is straight from the heart and from the head. And so listen up. We need to do this. That's like 4 or 5 pages. And 6 months later, I get a call from a friend. He says at headquarters, which is back in Bethesda, Maryland. And he says, "Hey, Bob," he says, "I understand the Buffalo branch is open." And I said, "Hey, Lee, I wouldn't move to Buffalo on a bet. Come on."
Right.
He says, "Bob," he said, "upstate New York is where GE is really powerful. But the Buffalo branch has 3 offices, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. And the competition up there was a computer services business, are eating our lunch. And our division vice president, general manager, rather, when he goes to meetings with the other 250 general managers, he gets dinged all the time about, what's going on with you guys? You're the only non-performer in the state, upstate New York." He says, "So Dr. Feeney and Dr. Castle and all the management team were all PhDs. He says, they're watching this closely." And he said, "You want to get to LA, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you're going to have a lot of attention on this. You do well, you're going to write your own ticket." "Okay, I'll go." "Well," he says, "I'm not interviewing you." He says, "But you're going to get a call." So I get the call, I take the job, and I go back and I move to Buffalo. And 4 months later, they say, "Bob, we'd like you to move to Rochester. That's right in the middle." You could have thought about that when
4 months earlier.
So that's why I hit the 26 moves, right? So I moved to Rochester. I'm there a year, and then I get a call to interview with this reorganization that's going on, and the person that wants to interview me is got a slot position open for Southern California, Los Angeles district. There I am.
There you go.
I meet with this person, and it's a woman out of New York City, and she's a tough as nails woman. And we're sitting there in this interview. I forget where we were at the time. And the first couple of things are, questions. I say, "Well, if I were the man, if I get this job, this is what I'll do." And about the third time I say that, she says, "Bob, stop there." She says, "Tell me what you're going to do." She said, "Because I've already made up my mind." So, okay. So I tell her what I'm going to do. I get the job. And of course, the main competitor for the job was someone in Los Angeles.
Right.
And so then I got that to face, which I faced before. And when I went to Seattle, it's really tough. Like, why are we bringing a guy from Boston into Seattle? Come on, we got a good guy here. No. So that's where I go. And then I learned a very important lesson from Ellen. I meet with her about 5 weeks after I'm back in the job. We meet at Los Angeles airport. They have the meeting rooms you could sign up for or go to or whatever. And I show up with all my data in my attaché case, and I put the case up on the thing. I'm ready to talk. And she says, and I go to open up. She said, "Oh, don't bother with that yet." I said, "Okay, fine." She said, "I want you to tell me. So tell me about the people there. What do you think of Charles? What do you think of Mimi and whoever?" She ran through a couple of things. "What do you know about them?" And we talked people the whole time. I never talked data. I didn't talk the numbers. And I said something effective. "I know you can see the numbers, but you didn't want to talk about the numbers." She said, "Bob," he says, "the numbers follow the people. If you want to work on the people, not the numbers will come from them, because you're not going to get them. You're not in sales anymore. You're not a branch manager. You're now you got 3 managers reporting to you. And it's this is a test for us. This is the first time they had 3 levels of management in the field." "Oh, okay." I'm there about a year and a half, and I get a call, and I was designated after about 2 years as what they call a high potential. So high pots get a lot of attention. These are people that they believe can move 2 levels above their current position. And GE had a very rigorous process that I really missed when I left there. And I've tried to institute, at least in my own personal operations, the same sort of thing, which is, besides appraisals, which I was big on, and people hated them. But I met the person who, the first VP of General Electric in Seattle. She was out there giving a talk, and I attended her program, and she was taking a night flight back. And so we had dinner together with this VP. Corporate VP we're talking about.
Right.
She was on the cover of Business Week while I was in.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so she I'll lose my trend. Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Hold on, we're going to start from the beginning.
Yeah, right. So the process in the career development would always identify those people. So after I'm in the field for another year or so, they want to give you a taste of marketing. So I go back to headquarters, and I am now a market manager for the market called CPAs, the big 8 firms, and the big 3 consulting firms, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, Bain, those guys. And but it's a marketing job. Now I've been to Crotonville a couple of times, so I was getting some training. But marketing wasn't in my blood. my blood ran. My heart was beating too fast for marketing. I discovered
because you're like an engineer. You think like an engineer, right?
Huh?
You think like an engineer.
Well,
is that what you mean?
No, I don't think that way. Yeah, I'm analytical, but I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I'm I think analytically to solve problems. I've been through the training for that as well that GE provided. But I've been a sales, I've always been involved in some sort of sales. When I first joined GE, I said to the guy that I was interviewing with, well, I don't know anything about computers. He says, hey, you sold suits in college, right? You worked at Sears, and you sold suits. He says, and also you did that Time magazine thing. And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, I had to deal with Time magazine, and I hung these little things on the bulletin boards around the college. And if people took a card and signed up, my code was on it, and I got paid a commission. So she says,
so you have something. I mean, they recognize you have an ability. Maybe you didn't think you had, but they saw it.
I did. Yeah, they did. That's right. They saw it. I wasn't thinking about it.
And they were right.
I was with GE 7.5 years, and in that time I had 4 promotions. So, and each promotion was always another level up and another level up. So you're always at the bottom of the salary range, plenty of room for growth. But I never even got to the mid range. It would be on to the next job, more money, everything. So, but I left there. I got the siren song of the startup business from a former manager I had. My first manager, Frank, out of Southern California. When I went to Seattle, he was my manager at that time, and he visits me. And says, Bob, he said, so how's it going? And he comes around to, he's joining this startup called National Computer Sales, selling PCs. Now, in fact, they weren't even called PCs in 1979, 80. They were called microcomputers is what they were called. Data General made one. IBM hadn't come out with their own yet, that little 10-inch screen. So he's saying, it wasn't quite the type of thing that Jobs said to Scully when he interviewed Scully and recruited him about the sugar water. You want to change the world, or you want to do sugar water. Yeah. But it was something like that. Yeah. He dressed up his own ex-company, GE, as this mammoth company. And even though they had a firebrand by the name of Jack Welch in there shaking things up, that wasn't going to flow down to you, Bob, very soon. So, take a look at this thing. These are all ex-IBM guys, a couple of Honeywell people and myself, and it's going to be big. And oh, by the way, you're going to get equity, and you get a little base salary, and we're selling. And the selling was unique. They rented station wagons, and they put on these dollies that you have, hospital dollies. Those things where the legs collapse when you roll it into the ambulance, that type of thing. Yeah, that was in the back. That was in the back of the station wagon. Mounted on that was one of these computers and a printer. So when we sold it, we would drive out to, in my territory was Los Angeles. I remember vividly driving out to a place in the Malibu Hills, beautiful place overlooking the ocean, in this station wagon, taking the dolly out. Because there's some entrepreneur, some guy, I don't forget even what he did, that wanted to see this thing, because the floppy disk and all this stuff, this was new stuff, man. And it went fairly well for some of us, but we overreached and stuff didn't work. It happens to startups, right?
Right.
And so they say, well, guys, they bring us in the room. Look, we're going to close the shop here. And, if you want to hang around and make a couple more sales, maybe, but it's up to you. But, we're really not going to do anything. And I said, well, I have to call this customer then and tell them you're not going to get the computer. I tell the guy we're closing the company, and this guy, there was a company that dealt with engines. I'm not sure what, but their T-shirt had an 8-block engine on the front of it or something like that. Because I had a couple of the shirts, and they said, "Well, we want the computer." No, we want it. Okay, fine. So I made my last sale and then left that company. And
wait, is this the company? If is this right, where you got 80% market share?
Oh yeah, that was Calcom.
That's the same company?
No, that was I went through a series of companies, about 6 of them or 7 of them. I'd have to look at the list. I probably
no, we don't need the list, but I'm just trying to capture where you hit some nice growth in some of these companies you were in. That was because of your leadership. Would you agree?
Yeah, because of that, but also there wasn't anybody who's going to show me. This was in a startup. In a startup, you want to help. Look at the end of your sleeves. That's it.
Right. That's right.
What was an interesting one in that the company was originally called Samurai, and it was in my own neighborhood where I lived in the suburbs in Westlake Village, and it was down this hill. I mean, it was 2 stop signs from where I lived. Low-rise building, and Samurai was a camera that attached a peripheral to a PC. Then at that point in time, PCs had some power, and it made slides. 35 millimeter slides. And I was familiar from that business from GE. So that much I knew, but this was a $12,000 peripheral. And there was only one other company in that market. It was called Matrix out of New York. There was a computer show coming up, in a graphics show coming up in Dallas. I went to the show, but before I went, there were 6 major resellers that added their software to this and sold a complete system to companies or serviced companies. And I made calls, and I found all this out from somebody I hired who was a veteran of that industry. And he was in New Jersey, but he said, these are the guys you call. And he was great at giving me the background, like the profile of these people. And so I called each one of them individually and said, "Hey, you going to be at the graphics show?" "Oh, of course they are." "Well, listen, can we set up some time for breakfast? How about a breakfast meeting?" "Okay, sure." All right. Art was from Boston, Waltham. So Art says, "Okay, so he's going to meet me for breakfast." And then I call number 2 and I say, "Hey, let's get together for lunch." So we met for lunch with another one. I did that with all 6. The 6th one was kind of funny, the breakfast. It was the guy out of Minnesota, I think. Minneapolis. Yeah, Minneapolis. And he says to me when we sit down, he says, "Bob," he says, "I know you've met with all my competitors." He said, and they see that you guys got a better product than Matrix and everything else, and, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, "But if I buy your product, if you're the product I buy to use," he says, "I'm going to be like them. There's no differentiation." And he was right. If you thought you differentiated yourself by the product. I said to him, we'll call him Jack. "Jack, I'm sorry, you're right. I thought these other guys, they talk about what they do from a service standpoint. They got great service, they got this, their software, et cetera. They don't talk about the peripheral that they use. So you sell your business, your value on a peripheral? Hey, I got the Samurai camera. Are you just going to sell the way you always sell and make slides for a lot less?" Okay. Yeah, well, let me think. He was the only guy who said, "Think about it." And so I came back from the show. The interesting part about this whole story was not only going to a trade show with stuff already planned to do, as opposed to standing in a booth saying, "Anybody?
Right.
But the interesting thing was, I said I tell you, I don't know who's going to see this later on, but I'm not going to say anything bad. But
Don't get yourself in trouble.
I remember my VP of sales. We were bought from a company. Samurai was bought by someone else who then sold it to California Computer. There was a big, well-known company that made plotters. Then they were getting into other areas. And so this product was one of them. And the vice president of sales, Larry Smith, says to me, "We're going to have a meeting with Joe Conklin, who's the president." It was a monthly meeting type of meeting. He says, "Bob," he said, I really don't think we want to emphasize the market share that we have." I said, "You don't?" He says, "No." He says, look, you did a great job. He knows the sales are going fine. 80% doesn't need to be mentioned. I said, Larry, why? He says, Bob, if we have 80% of the market, we don't need you.
Right, right.
He says, I need you. I said, well, but what do you need me for? He says, we're getting into color printers. He says, I want you to head up national sales for color printers. He says, but I don't want you to be fired because we don't have a job for you. And I'm a little, Conlon doesn't know that's where I'm going, but I just stick around for me. Well, I said, okay, fine. Well, that was my first introduction to corporate inside garbage.
Oh, God, it goes on.
Yeah. Anyway.
I'm so captivated because it's so interesting. Let me ask you a couple questions. The first one is I want you to just for a second just touch on Franklin Covey, because that is interesting to me, because I've read 7 Habits about 50 times. I've given it to people as gifts, and I actually in certain ways have applied that to my own business and my own life. And you worked there. You worked there when it was first, I guess, a startup, right?
Here's the chronology. There are 2 famous people, they're gone now. Hiram Smith, who is from Salt Lake City, or in Salt Lake City, and another guy by the name of Stephen Covey, Dr. Stephen Covey. And you know all about Covey. Smith, Smith you don't know about. Well, back in the early 80s, Smith and another guy, Dick Winwood, who was a guy who worked for me in Seattle. We got together great. We did great things. Great. And he gave me a wonderful send-off gift. And I got to tell you, the inside of this quote book, because I love quotes, as you know.
You sent me a good one this morning.
The inside of this quote book showed a picture of a guy standing at his front door, opening his front door to someone. And standing on the other side of the door is the Grim Reaper, right? Coming to get him. And the caption down the bottom is, I can't go yet. I still have stuff in my pipeline.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
But the Covey thing came together because of Dick Winwood's, what are you doing, Bob? And I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And he says, here's what he's doing. And I said, hey, that's great. That's wonderful. I was a big time management person since the 70s. I'd read the original book on it, and a couple of original books on it. But in 77 or 8, my son was graduating from he's got one more year at Boston College at the time. And so I called Dick up and I say, hey, listen, my son's been working the door, meaning checking IDs at Cityside, which is a place next to the campus where everybody goes. It's a drinking place.
Right.
And I suppose they serve food there some of the time. But, and I say, I'd like them to have a job that is in a different element, but so you're not doing any seminars. You guys are young. You got you're doing stuff you did stuff with Merrill Lynch, et cetera, but nothing going on in LA. You could do a public seminar. We get some people going, and then, you can get some customers here. He said, okay, sure. He says, and he was going to give him about $1,000 a month or something like that. And he sent him a big ream of computer printout paper, and Ken would make cold calls. He set up a meeting. Meeting goes really well. Dick came out to teach it. As usual, people were alive with interest. We got a call from Denison, which is a paper label company, and bought by somebody out here a couple of years ago. But they wanted a management seminar done down at Newport, Rhode Island. Nice place to go to do it. And it was all their managers. So I'm thrilled to hear that. I called Dick up and I say, hey, they want a seminar from you. So going to see you again. He said, why don't you teach it? And I said, well, I have a job, Dick. I was working at that time. I was head of marketing not head of marketing, but I was working for Stratus Computers, which was another, not quite startup. It was well established, but it had stock and all that stuff. So he says, I'm going to send you Hiram's tapes. You can play the tapes. I'll send you the materials. Don't worry, you'll be fine. So I do it. I love doing it. They loved having me because it's a great topic. The seminars were killers, and everybody loved the planner. And we tell people, look, 21 days, no internet at that time. We always tell them at the end of the program, all right, there's a couple of things you promised to do at the beginning, and that is send us a 21-day letter on how it's going. because in 21 days that's what it takes to form a habit. And the habit was using the planner, right? So, well, we didn't get them in 21 days. Some of them we got in a month, maybe 2 months, 3 months, maybe even a year. And of course, the year ones would say, I've been meaning to send this to you, but it's never been an A on my list or something like that. But they're always outstanding. Great. Your head was exploded with, like, I'm great,
Right.
because of the way that program went. And we went public. I was in the field teaching and selling. I did about 800 of those seminars. And then they said, look, you want to teach or sell? And I said, I want to sell. And my son, who's working for the company, said, I'll teach. He's been doing it for 30 years now. And off we go. I go back into the field. I start to make some real money. I mean, doubled my income. And
Wow.
then they say, hey, take over national accounts. Then it's like, no, okay, here, VP of sales. I'm VP of sales. Then they go public. We're going public. And we go public. And I got founder stock because it was a subchapter S, and I was part of that. We go public at $15.50 a share, I guess, and of course, founder stock is $1, and so multiply that times your piece, and you got a nice holiday. And the thing about it though is they want me to move to Salt Lake City, and the guy running the company, president, was the guy who took us public. He was an ex Merrill guy and a regional manager, and I said, I want to go back into the field. And he says, I can understand that. People in the brokerage business have done that as well. They'd rather go back in the field. There's more money than being in management. And I've already got my big piece of the pie anyway. So I go back in the field, and my income's going through the roof because I know the game. And I just did I did a smart job as far as who I dealt with. It was always, I didn't have 100 companies as clients. I had 15. But they were buying crazy.
The thing the reason I didn't want to skip over that is because Stephen Covey, I was looking while you were talking, they've sold 40 million copies of that book in 40 different languages, according to what it says right now on Google.
I can believe it.
And you were a founder of that company.
Well, no. Here it goes. We go public, and about a year or two later is when we buy Covey. We purchased.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, they said it was a merger.
Right.
We bought Covey, but it was a Hatfield. One is in Provo, Utah. The other's in Salt Lake City. It's a Mormon company, which is a great company to be part of. The values and everything are just fantastic. But there were the Covey people and there were the Franklin people, and the Covey people answered the phone because Stephen Covey, of course, had made a seminar or someone read his book and said, we want to do it. So they say, great, we'll be out. It'll be, we'll charge you X bucks to talk to you. And then we'll charge you X bucks times to sell it to you. And we, on the other hand, were out selling. So we were making more money than them and all the rest of it. But it was when you talk to someone, you'd say, well, I'm a Franklin person, or they'd say, I'm a Covey person. It was that type of thing.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. It came together. It was. It came together, but slowly, and that's fine, But I left.
With all of that,
after that.
With all that being said, I'm sorry, there's a little feedback. With all of that being said, what would you say? And just give me one. Would be like one of the biggest challenges that you can pull from all those experiences. Everything you just said. One of the biggest challenges that you faced that you had overcome. You had different businesses, you had different situations, but you must, at some point, did you just have some major challenge or major obstacle that was like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this?
Well, you're talking about from in my career, my business career.
Yeah, because you gave me so many good examples of all these different positions you held, and there must have been something that popped up where it was like, wow, this is a major problem. And then you figured out through creativity how to solve it.
Oh boy.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Part of the difficulty of identifying that is that challenges have always ended up in my mind as being opportunities. But if I were to think about challenges, I mean, other than, look, I went to 2 places as a manager I told you about where the place that I was going to, or the location, thought that their guy was going to get the job. So there was this earn their respect and earn their confidence going on for the first 3 or 4 months. Plus, one of those guys stayed as a manager under me, and that was always a little bone of contention. Major challenge, for some people, I think maybe the major challenge would have been all the moves I made, because every single one of these moves was made when they wanted me to move. Remote work was not the thing then. And they were always mid-year, like January. And, so both of my sons would have been in more than 8 grades between 0 and 8. One of them got a double promotion, so he's very bright. So he's the one that went to Yale.
That's interesting, because you actually, that was a brilliant answer to the question, because it is difficult to answer the question of what the biggest challenge is when you see challenges as what people should see them as, which is opportunities. That is the point.
That is the point. Yeah, but it wasn't like I was trying to make the point.
It's like, it's so natural. Like, it's hard to think of one, because for somebody who doesn't see themselves, who sees things as an opportunity, even when things are difficult, it's like, wow. So yeah, a lot of challenges, but they always present the opportunity. So you see the glass half full.
Matt, there's a book that if you would ask me books that I've enjoyed, one of them is by a guy. He's written 50 of them. Wayne Dyer.
Oh, I know Wayne Dyer. Yeah.
His last book was probably his best, because it was his last book.
Yeah.
And I can see
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's right. The name of it was I can see clearly now.
Yeah.
But why I mention that is because I just realized that what I was doing was what one of my favorite quotes is now, having read his book, which is, when you look at the things you look at, let's see, to change the things you look at, change the way you see them. In other words, look at them a different way. Simple example: when I'd fly into LAX after spending 4 days up in Franklin, I come in on a Friday night. My wife would meet me at the airport, pick me up. So I'm standing out there on the curb, and sometimes she's late. First couple of times, it's like, where you been? Whatever, that's the way you've been gone 4 days, and that's how you open the door and say, well, it took you so long. Well, I read something, and I think it was Tony Robbins' book that I read, one of his books back then, and it had to do with perspective. And he said, look at it a different way, right? Change the way you see it. And I thought to myself, what he meant by that was, in this case, was what I should have said was, been standing on the curb. Instead of thinking, where is she? Gee, I hope she didn't have an accident on the freeway, or I hope she's okay, or I hope she didn't forget me. But that was, and when you change the way you see that or think about that, it changes it completely, changes the way you see it.
So any situation, when you're in it, it is the set of lenses that you happen to see it through at that moment, but you can change it. And I do follow Tony Robbins too. It's a very, very important. It's an important point of view that you have control of your thoughts, and you can choose in any moment to change how you're experiencing the moment.
Sure,
not easy to do for but you can do it with practice. You can make that the way you are.
Yeah,
you can change it and that's why Tony Robbins is so successful. He puts it in such simple terms that people can actually work with, and people have major life-changing paradigm shifts that follow him,
Yeah. Yep.
And Wayne Dyer too, all these guys. And you mentioned before the call, you mentioned somebody else.
Jim Rome.
Yeah, Jim Rome. And there's a guy and that's actually who Tony Robbins' mentor was.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Life. It wasn't like he read his books. He was actually his mentor. They worked together. That's why he sounds so much like Jim. But it's interesting because those people who have that, it's like a gift to share that information in a way. When you watch Jim Rome talk, and I've watched so many of his recordings,
really,
he has a way of communicating with emphatic pauses, with his voice going up and down at the right times. It seems natural. Who knows if he created that? But boy, the way he delivers his message and everything he says is so powerful. And Tony Robbins too. So what you just said, change your perspective is powerful.
Yeah. Well, what you said about the delivery, I'll give you an example. Hiram Smith is the same way, very different than Jim Rohn. Hiram Smith does a seminar. He does it the same way every time. He does not change it. One of the things that tells you about his delivery is there's an organization called SIFMA, Securities Industry Financial something. Once a year, they have high-level executives back to the Wharton School for a week worth of, quote, training. It's not training. It's speakers up front, down on the stage, that sort of thing. I got there once. Hiram, and you get there by invitation. I got one invitation once. I got invited once. They didn't like my change your choices, not your hours speech. So I guess I didn't come back. They were afraid that they were going to cut back on their hours and they didn't want that. But the Hiram had been invited back more than any other speaker. You know how many years in a row he went there to speak? 25
Wow.
years. He's a guy also that spoke regularly to the Command College of the Army. When he died a couple of years ago, the people that showed up, for him were amazing, just amazing. So
I'm writing notes. I'm writing.
I had a pause there.
Over the 50 years that you mentioned, to bring it kind of back to the current, you've done all these things, you've moved around.
Yeah.
It not only did it shape your life, obviously it shaped your children's lives, and they've sounds like they've been successful as well. Being able to take that and do what you do now, which it's strategic, it's advisory. I'm thinking of a good word to describe like what that is. You're able to take the wisdom from all these different experiences and to guide people and to be a mentor and a coach to others now, which is what you're doing.
Well, yes. I mean, look, I'm interested. I don't think anybody that I've ever met has reached their full potential. There's something left. There's some gas there in the tank. And before they leave, get it on the table. Don't leave it on the table. Take it off the table. Use it. And I'm now on this kick of, not just how you think about things, your beliefs. I mean, your thoughts. Emerson said, the ancestor of every action is a thought. Now, how you think about something makes a difference on what that action is. And how you think about things is filtered by the conditioning that you've experienced since the day you took your first breath. You learned at an early age, don't cross the street without looking both ways. Then you saw Popeye eating spinach, so you thought, I'm going to eat spinach. He made spinach something that was good. Those sorts of things. And you are conditioned every day, sometimes at work. It's you do something, you have someone, and I've done it too as a manager, where someone does something and you say, that's like you. That doesn't do anything. It's like saying to the kid at the dinner table, I'm going to put 2 glasses down in front of you. Which glass do you want me to pour the milk in? Because I know you're going to spill one of them. And you're telling the kid that he's clumsy. Or
you're programming. Yes, that is serious programming, and parents don't realize they're doing it.
They don't know.
Hang on. I was writing something down, and while you were talking, I wanted to show you. Is this coming through backwards? Can you see that straight?
No, I can see it, beautifully, but I can't read it because it's
okay. Loaded. I'm going to read it. This says, I was in a chiropractor's office when I lived in New Jersey, and he had this on the wall. And his style of practicing wasn't so much about the adjustments. It was started with your thinking. It started with what the root cause of how you feel is. So we would go in there, and he would start with, if I didn't feel good, we would go back to, okay, the outcome, which is at the bottom, comes from your actions. Your actions come from your thoughts, and your thoughts come from your beliefs. Or in other words, everything starts with your beliefs, which is what you were talking about. It's your programming. Could be good, bad, dysfunctional, or whatever. That creates your thoughts. Your thoughts don't come from nowhere. then your thoughts result in what you do. That's your actions. And then the outcome, if you want to change the outcome, change the action. If you want to change the action, change what you're thinking. If you want to change what you're thinking, change your damn beliefs.
Did you read? Did you see the piece of paper I sent you that was the MBA at the top? Mindset, behavior, achievement. It's a one-pager. You just described it.
Oh, well, that's even better because I have this, but I didn't see that. So now we know where great minds think alike.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's exactly what, and you can work the model. You can work the model backwards. That is, rather than say, start with the belief side, you can go back to, okay, this is what I need. What do I have to do to get it? And what do I have to believe to get it? And training, traditional training, sales training, works on behaviors. It doesn't work on the driver, the filter of everything is how the window that you look through is what forms that perspective. And
exactly.
As Anais Nin said, we see things as we are, not as they are. So
I was in a meeting the other day with about 10 people that work in my company. And I said to them, how many of you have ever gone to an art museum? And for some reason, most of them said no. I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to play along. So I said, okay, well, if you did go to an art museum, it's possible that all 10 of us can stand in front of the same painting and see something different. Or I said, if you look up at the clouds and say, well, what do you see in the clouds? 10 people would say they see something different, but we're all looking at the same thing. And that's the interesting thing about that. You and I were talking about our behavior types, D, I, S, and C. And because of those behavior types and our personalities, we all see different things in the same situation, and we all could perceive it differently and all take it differently. And I find that one of the ways tools that I use to help myself not misunderstand people is to validate what they've said. Let me just make sure I heard this correctly. So what you're saying is, and then what I'll get back is, no, that's not what I said.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or yeah, you got it. Or well, let me. And I do that because I want to understand. I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. I learned that along the way from reading books and from training, from sales training and other things. But wow, so many people, to your point, see the same thing differently. And it's all because of the programming. It's because of the way we see the world. And that makes things very challenging. Even when you're in sales trying to show somebody or demonstrate why making this choice would be a good choice for them.
Yeah.
They may not see it because of the way you're explaining it, because of the way you're presenting it. And you just one little shift, 1 degree to I would love that.
Yeah. I had a manager at a financial services firm, and I was working with one of his teams, and he said, hey, you ever coach managers? And I said, yeah, I mean, not very often, not very much, and he said, well, because I want you to coach me. And I said, well, all right. And in this, the branch his office was across the street. When I lived in Century City, it was across the street from me. So I would go over and see him, sit in his office. And he said to me at within 20 minutes that he says, my problem is my manager. I said, really? He says, yeah. And then he goes and tells me that all the problems he has with the manager. I said, let me tell you something. You don't have a problem with your manager. Your manager might have a problem with you, but you don't have, there's a quote, another quote, when the jug bounces off the rock, it's the jug that's going to break.
I've never heard that. That's good.
Yeah. And the manager's the rock. You got the problem. He's got a problem with you if you think you have a problem with him. Right?
Another thing that I look at that sometimes is the idea of the mirror effect. If I'm feeling that there's a problem, or if I'm feeling something's not right, I look at myself first. Wait. What am I actually reading in this situation? Is it actually that, or is it maybe me and the way I'm seeing it? Or if I'm getting a negative reaction from somebody, I used to assume it was them, but I've learned along the way. Whoa. If I'm getting a negative reaction, first let me see if it's something on my end. Am I responsible for did I say something incorrectly, or did I not communicate it clearly, or maybe, okay, it's not me, it really is them. But that pause, that awareness to realize that, especially if you're an employee and you have a problem with those around you, which becomes now you're a victim of something, right? That whole mentality takes you down a very, very dark abyss.
I had the luxury. I shouldn't say the luxury. I used when I was at GE. I leveraged the heck out of GE. I won a major opportunity at a bank in Rochester because I involved. There was an area VP, a relationship VP assigned to the New York area, the upstate New York area. So I call him and I tell him I'm selling to Lincoln First Finance, bank there, and I'm up against IBM, that they've got the time sharing option, and I'm selling time sharing services. So, but does he know anybody, or can he help me in that? He said, "Who are you selling to?" And I said, "Bruce Schneider." And he said, "I am the godfather to Bruce's son or son-in-law or something like that, to their child, And I said, "So you know him?" He says, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Oh, well." I said, "Well, I hope he knows. Maybe you can tell him how kind of service we provide." Who got the job? I got the job, and I get an award from headquarters on that thing. So it's leverage.
We got to wind it down.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's been an hour already. I feel like you're one of those guys that has like just like endless fun stories, and like selfishly, the ones that I'm most interested in are the ones that are probably not going to be told forever, which are the ones that people who were in those wars. Because obviously World War II veterans are mostly gone, and so there's just the generations as they move on. It's those stories. I don't know. I find them to be so interesting. The stories about history. I could talk to you probably for hours if you felt like talking about your experiences in the military. But wow, did that really play a part? It sounds like in your business life too. Like everything you learned and everything that it all came together for you.
Listen, after today, anytime you want to talk some more about what you're interested in, your interest in beliefs or that whole realm of things.
Yeah, that's so cool.
We can have a conversation about it,
Yeah.
and then we, it doesn't have, then we won't have to deal with all the other stuff. We just talk about that. And by the way, what you said about seeing things differently, have you ever seen that picture of we were given a picture and you said, what do you see there? And I remember being in a room with 6 other people, and I was the only one who saw the old lady as opposed to the young girl.
Oh, I've seen that picture. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I thought that this little exercise was a setup to see how I would deal with everybody saying I was wrong about what I was looking at.
Oh,
it wasn't a setup. I was seeing once you get fixated on the old lady, unless someone says, see that right there? Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Now I see it.
That's such a great exercise. I'm going to do that in my next staff meeting.
Yeah.
It's like the essence of everything, how we all see things differently.
Yeah.
Listen, I started out the show by talking about the fact that you have just a diverse amount of experience and God, the stories you have. But at the end of the day, it's like when you have the longevity, right? You have the decades of all these different experiences in all these different businesses. Some of the words I wrote down while you were talking, which are important to any business owner, any entrepreneur, somebody like you who's been involved in putting deals together, sales, marketing. This is some of the highlights I pulled out of what you said. You have a great attitude. Your attitude is key. Your mindset is key. You didn't say this, but I find that your story leads me to believe you're a very flexible person. All the moving around and all the change, right? There's flexibility. And that somewhere along the line, whether you thought about it or not, you played the long game. Like you were in it. Like you just kept working and working and working. And it was, I don't mean age. I mean, the long game, like it just kept happening for you because you were doing the work. This is what I picked up from everything you said. And the beliefs. And in the end, I guess the beliefs are underneath everything I just listed off to you.
Someone wrote a book. I was called by a person who said that they had got my name from this other person that had worked for me. She was writing a book called The Renaissance Soul. And the Renaissance Soul and I looked at my career changes, and it tracks very neatly with that as well. But in the book, she mentions my name and that I'm a perfect example of the Renaissance soul. You do something for a while, and then, okay, well, that's done, and this will be interesting, and you move on. One of the things I should mention, the glue to all this, probably probably my biggest accomplishment is not my career. My biggest accomplishment was meeting my wife. That's awesome. I'm logging 58 years here of marriage this in August. 58.
58. Wow.
58. She raised the kids. I was gone. I was climbing the ladder of success, right? This is a paperweight.
Right.
This ladder was against the wrong wall. You ever hear that?
This ladder was against the wrong wall. What do you mean by that?
Well, it was all me, and it was all career. It wasn't about my son's baseball game or my son's this or that, or going to I had one son that used to do debates in his magnet school and win them. And I never went to one of his debates. Wasn't a soccer dad. I wasn't a baseball dad. I wasn't there, so.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so
that can resonate. I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people. That's an important message too.
Yeah.
Bob, we're gonna use that as our closing message.
Yeah.
That we're gonna finish with that. That's a great message to end the show with. Put your ladder up against the right wall.
Well, but the trouble is you're so blind at the beginning.
You can't see it until later on. Or if somebody pokes you, like, wake up.
Hey, Will, you remember the Cats in the Cradle song?
Of course, by Harry Chapin.
Yeah, we'll get together soon, son, and we'll have a good time then.
Yeah, that was you. That's a sad song. When you listen to the words, it's sad. It's a great song, but it's sad.
Yep,
it's sad. It's almost like it's like full of regret, and that's a sad topic.
Yeah,
but I don't want to end the show on a sad topic.
Listen, I'm ending here's the thing is, I don't know if this is my last chapter or not, but I'm now working actively with both of my sons. Now, I don't mean they're full-time doing what I do. One of them is a strategic marketing consultant for companies in the medical bio devices or something. He's got a couple of degrees. Went to Dartmouth for the medical and business, and then he's got Yale undergrad. And the other one is doing a lot of training, big in the entertainment world, does a lot of things in the entertainment world, knows everybody, including Jim Rohn, met him, and famous restaurant in LA which is like Cheers for him. So he meets all the celebrities, Willie Nelson, everything from Willie Nelson to that.
Kidding.
Yeah. But but instead of that, the son doesn't turn out to say, Dad, I got the kids, got a cold, can't make it, but we'll get together soon, son, and we'll have a good time then. I don't have that problem. It's because they love their mother so much that they get to come to my place and they get to talk to her. They walk in and they don't say, where's Dad? They talk to them, and I say, hey, you've got an appointment here, right? So.
My friend,
I'm lucky.
It's been interesting, man. It's been an interesting conversation. I'm going to wind it down. I really appreciate you telling all these stories.
Here you go.
What do you got? What is that? Whoa, who's that guy on the left?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen,
awesome.
I get mistaken. We were at dinner my birthday party at a great famous restaurant here in LA, and somebody mistook. They wanted to know who Ken's new squeeze was, his new girlfriend.
Yeah.
And who was the old guy at the table? Was that your dad, Ken, or what? It was me and my wife. She looks 20 years younger, and everybody tells her.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Hey, listen, it's a pleasure for me. I love talking.
It's fun, man. I will see you soon. We're gonna talk soon. I know I see you. I know I see you once every week or so on the other thing we belong to.
Yeah.
So I'll see you soon there. But thank you. I really appreciate you doing this. I think that the messages were great. And if there's anything you want to share with anybody, do you want to put out anything where somebody, if they want to reach you, an email, a website, anything you want to tell anybody?
Well, let's assume that there's a lot of people that aren't financial advisors. So I'll give you my email address
do
as
it.
opposed to my website. But my website's aumiq.com, aum-iq.com. That's the financial one.
Okay.
But as far as talking about this or saying, hey, I've had the same experiences, or what do you think about that? I'd love to hear people. I'd love to get a 1 day or 21 day letter, right? An email saying, hey, I listened to that whole thing and here's what I took away. Did I miss anything? Oh, I'm flattered, so I'm going to respond. That address is really simple. It's bob@boblodie.com. And that's BOBLODIE.com.
So when this gets published on YouTube, it'll be down below in the description. So it'll be out there forever.
Wow.
And I mean, hopefully somebody will see it and they'll reach out to you. But again, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for sharing your stories today.
My pleasure. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. Have an awesome, awesome afternoon.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.